Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here, and in association with my good friends at Preaching Today and Food for the Hungry, I bring you a podcast that hopefully helps you get better at the craft of teaching and preaching and communicating God's word while always hoping and ensuring our character leads the way. Well, today I'm excited because we get to have a conversation with the co-host of the award-winning Lucky Few podcast. She is an author, a book that is coming out called Blessed Are the Rest of Us. Her name is Micha Boyett, and I'm really excited because we're going to talk about the Beatitudes, but from an entirely different angle. We've looked at the Beatitudes a handful of times on this podcast because just this section of verses, whether from Mark Scandrett or even Jason Adam Miller, I love it. But I wanted to get Micha's perspective because I think you are going to be stretched as a church leader. You're going to be stretched to kind of see the actual words and heartbeat of Jesus in a new way. And so without further ado, Micha Boyett, thank you for joining me on the Crafting Character Podcast.
I am very excited to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Well, I'm always fascinated. How does someone because you've written before, how did you kind of hone in on the Beatitudes and blessed are the rest of us?
Oh man. It's a long story. So the last book I wrote was 10 years ago. It came out exactly 10 years ago. And then I got pregnant with my third kid and had a plan. I actually had another book contract that I was just going to pop out a baby, then write another book. It was going to be great.
Like you do.
Like you do. And I was going to write a book on rest. That was my plan. And then the least restful thing possible happened, or at least the way that I saw it. My son, in prenatal, I was told that he had Down syndrome. And I had a lot of, in that season, before he was born, I worked through a lot of grief around what this would mean for my life, what it would mean for his life, what it would mean for our family. And then he came into the world, and I realized this was going to be a lot more challenging for me, both physically and emotionally than I first had thought. I think at first I grieved for just the change, the child I thought I was going to have, and then what the reality was, and the pain of when your plans are kind of upended. And then when my son Ace showed up, I was like, oh, it's you. Okay, I know you, I love you. And he moved from being a diagnosis to being my child who I loved. And it was a real season of transformation for me, of both the way that I had lived my life, where I sort of burned the candle at both ends, and it was raising little kids, but I was working as hard as I could, and I was writing books, and all these things. He just needed me physically. He needed me and needed me and needed me. And we were at doctor's appointments, and we were in therapy all the time. And there was a moment of me realizing, oh, I think that lots of parents quit their jobs if they can, when they have this moment of realizing how much their kids need them and need to be in all these places and need someone to oversee their growth and how everything is coming together for their development. And so I stopped writing for a while. And it's funny because in that season, I think if I had written a book about rest back then, it would have been a very surface level, here's how you work hard and make space for rest, And I think Ace's life, the challenges that he's faced, the transformation of the way that I understand him and the way that I understand disability and the way that I understand his place in the world. All of those things have transformed me from this perspective of rest that was very much, here's another task we need to learn how to do, to like a way of living in the world with slowness and gentleness and with the presence of the Spirit. And so that's one part of answering this question. The other is that as I began to experience, like after I moved from the grief of getting this diagnosis to being Ace's mom in the world, I realized I was worried about how I felt about this diagnosis, but what Ace really has, like what is really hard here is how the world feels about him. And I began to really seek new language for how to help the world see him. And, I had to kind of start with this question of what is it that makes us human? And I think for me, I had lived my life as the person who could perform. I could get the stuff done. I was the girl in church who was the youth group leader and, win the awards. And then so much of how I understood my own spiritual life, my own worth and value was by what I accomplished and what I was able to do. And being in this moment of raising a little boy who I knew I can't live this way anymore, where I think that value comes from what we do, because this is not what I believe about him. And it's not what I believe that God believes he is. And so I started asking the question, what is it that makes us human? And finally started to land in this place of like, what makes us human is our ability to give and receive love. It's our vulnerability. It's the way that we can be soft towards each other. And I found that in the Beatitudes. I came to the Beatitudes. So I was always kind of, I've always felt like the Beatitudes were mysterious. There's like this, Jesus is saying you're blessed if you are miserable. And so it's sort of like, okay, thanks. And I think that my challenge with the Beatitudes was always seeing it transactionally, like blessing as this thing that God gives us. If we do this thing, which is like be poor, or if we do this thing like grieve, I think I needed to start to work through what it actually means to be blessed. And this is another part of what I experienced when Ace was born with Down syndrome. I felt like there were kind of two ways that people reacted to his presence in our lives that were both missing his humanity. There was kind of the side of the pity that I received from folks who were so sorry when I had, just given birth to this beautiful baby, and people were so sorry that this had happened to me, or like how I got used to walking into stores and people staring at him, and this reaction to him that he's not fully human, or that he's a burden on society. And then there was the reaction from the other side that was like the endless amount of memes I got on Facebook about him being an angel, sent from God to teach us all, like inspiration. Yeah. And this knowing in me, Ace is not here to be our inspiration. He's a human. He's here to be himself, and he gets to live his life. And just feeling like all around me, there were these ideas of, Ace is here to be a blessing, or Ace is a burden. And neither of them were were what I wanted to, or what I believed. And what does it mean to be blessed anyway? And I think that's part of what I needed to find as I started spending more and more time with the Beatitudes, because I saw in Ace the 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 blessing of the meek, the blessing of those who live without power, and I saw in myself this, that there was some kind of blessing that was happening through my grief and through my transformation. But what I really finally came to was, as I was studying the Beatitudes, I found Jonathan Pennington's scholarship, the Sermon on the Mount and Human Flourishing. And he talks about this translation, and forgive me for the Greek because I never took my Greek classes. Makarios, from a macarism. So he talks about how we translate Makarios as blessed in English, but when you look at what Jesus was doing, he's taking this ancient Greco-Roman virtue tradition where the orders would stand up and they would recite to the people, like, I'm going to tell you how to live a happy, flourishing life. And then they would list these macarisms, and they would be, you want to be happy and flourishing, then, live this life of virtue, keep your word and work hard and, all these kinds of things. So Jesus takes that idea and he stands up in front of this crowd who is, these people who are living under the oppression of the Roman government and who are mostly blue collar workers just struggling to make ends meet. And he says to them, I'm going to tell you how to be happy, how to have a flourishing life, how to be whole. And here it is. You are moving towards wholeness when you're in poverty. You're moving towards wholeness when you're grieving. You're moving towards wholeness when you are powerless or when you release your power for others. And he moves along these blessings. And for me, that really transformed my thinking around the Beatitudes, because yes, that was true in my life. Like, I was moving toward wholeness as I learned to be more human, as I learned to be more vulnerable. And Ace was helping me learn how to be more vulnerable.
Micah, I love that because, if you go back 10 years, you've released your first book, you've got another one on the way around rest. You seem to have drive and just achievement, like you're going for it. And you could have probably written a very good book, like you said, on rest. But it's amazing that somehow we can have these experiences of life where we can come back to a passage of scripture that has felt mysterious or has felt like we sort of understood it or didn't. And then all of a sudden, it's like you begin to see it through an entirely new lens of, oh my goodness, this is like what it means to experience like how to see people, and just to hear you talk about that, because I think for so many people, and it's really easy to, like you said, when you see someone who it is just different from you in any way, shape, or form, you can either pull away, you can pity, you can't, but we miss out on seeing the humanity. Mm-hmm. We miss out on the invitation to give and receive love. And we miss out on the chance to recognize another's humanity. And I'm curious because you're also a youth pastor, and I'm curious just in the experience as mother to Ace and just all that he has taught you, how has that changed the way that you communicate? How has it changed the way, when you do preach and when you do teach and when you do share? Because I think about that, it's easy to probably go, oh, this is what rest was going to be, or this is how I would teach the Beatitudes. But when you're actually trying to see and help people understand what is human. How is that shifted in your way of writing and communicating?
That's a really good question.
Thank you. I feel good about that one.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's in general shaped my theology in a massive way, where the good news has to be good news for Ace. It has to be good news for our most vulnerable among us. If for us to receive the love of God, we have to do certain things and believe certain things in a specific way and receive the love of God the way that, whoever has told us how to receive it, then it is another to-do thing, another to-do list that is, it's not good enough. I love to argue about theology. I really do. I love to have all the conversations. I love to wrestle with scripture. And I think what Ace has shown me is that the truest form of faith is the quietest and the slowest. And I was just writing today about Easter. As we're recording this, is before Easter. And I was thinking about my friend Jeff Chu has written and talks about the compost bin.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about resurrection in terms of the compost bin and how we take these scraps, these things in us that we don't want, we don't need, and that sometimes our understanding, on Easter, we think of as resurrection as this bright explosion, like thing that boom, immediately happens and everything changes after. But most of the time when we see God work, God is working slow like compost, and resurrection in our lives looks slow like compost. And my son Ace is almost 9 now. And his favorite thing is to be in the garden with me. Ace is, in addition to having Down syndrome, he is autistic and he's non-speaking. And there's something really steadying to him. His body really seeks, it kind of can respond to sensory overload. He seeks calm and he seeks squeezes, and he needs a lot of intense connection. But when he's out in the garden, he can really just be himself. And he loves working in the compost with me. And we'll open up the bin and feed the worms and, just watch the worms move around. I think my answer to your question, Steve, that I'm trying to get to
no, it's good.
Is that I want to teach and live out a faith that feels real to what is happening in the world around me. And that is a compost bin kind of faith where we keep faithfully showing up and giving God our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities and our longings and asking for them to be made into something beautiful. And I think that that's a theology that is true for Ace's life too.
Yes, it really speaks. I feel like every Monday I have counseling, 11 a.m., 12:20. I feel like every week my therapist, she reminds me, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think I've always, and sometimes you can get into church and it feels even more machine oriented. It's like someone tweeted out this week, for Holy Week, it is a lot of planning center and emails and admin and it is a go thing. And I think it's amazing how we can use semantics and tweak them in our favor And so a friend of mine always says, we don't take communion, we receive communion, because taking is like the man and the woman in the garden, they're taking, and just the simple shift of a word, or I had this semantic in my mind, like the way that I would think about is, the faster I go, the more steady I am, like on a like if I'm water skiing, it's like it's fast. And so it gave me permission to live my life wildly out of rhythm. But this slowness, and there's this weightiness in your words. And even I have not finished the whole book, but I started to read through this, and the weightiness at which you write. These aren't just, again, flippant concepts. These are invitations into the slow and the steady good work of Jesus. And I'm also curious because when it comes to disability, and especially like inside the church, I think you talked about it. People can look at it like one way, they can look at it the other way. Like for you, again, working, serving in a church, but then also as someone who I think has just an insight, the podcast, Lucky Few, is just there's so many people I know who have just said what a breath of fresh air that podcast is.
Thanks.
But I feel like the way that you all have been able to hold space, but I even just saying the word disability, we talked about this right before, like it feels even hard for me to say, like, do you even get caught up in the semantics of how do we even talk about this? Because I think in some ways there's churches that like to bright side it in the sense of like toxic positivity, like, oh my God, you're a man. Oh, they're the best kids in the whole world. And they are, they're so, but it's like, it's almost like we don't know how to actually enter in well. So help process for the church leaders in us. How do we do this well and better? Because you do hit at this in the book.
Yeah, I think it's, I like that you started with semantics, because I do think for those of us who are able-bodied, we're worried to even say disability. We're like, is this the way we should say it? Do we like point out that somebody has a disability? And, there's lots of great places to think about and learn about how to speak when it comes to disability and what disabled people actually want. Because I think there's kind of been a reaction culturally in the disabled community to able-bodied people who have come up with words that make us feel better. Special needs, differently abled. There's some things like that for the most part, if you listen to the voices of those living with disability, which, thank God for social media for all of its failures, like there's ways to listen now.
Yep.
And for the most part, people with disabilities say the word disabled. It's real in my life. It affects me deeply. So, like, don't dance around it, but treat me with honor and respect. And I think that there is, I would say to those who are listening, who are pastors and leading churches, that if there aren't people living with disability who are in your pews, it is because you are missing them. If there's not people with disability in your life, it's because you're not looking for them. There's there's a real failure of noticing in our culture.
Yes.
And I've lived in New Jersey for 3 years. When we moved into our house, we moved from San Francisco. When we moved here to Jersey, we happened to just have moved down the street from a house called Co-Home that is an inclusive housing project for people with disability and without disability living together and supporting each other. And it's been so cool to have them as our neighbors and to have people that Ace can look up to who are living down the street and living independently. But one of the ideas behind Co-Home is that so often when group homes are are made, they are put on the edges of our towns and our cities. And for people with disabilities who are living in these group homes to participate in the life of the community, they need to get in a van and be driven to whatever the event is. And where I am, my home is in the historic district of this town, a couple of blocks from downtown. And they purposefully chose this house, this historic home, for a co-home to be in, so that all of these people who may or may not be able to drive can just walk to the store, and they can walk to the coffee shop, and they can get froyo when they want to, and they can walk to their jobs. And I share that as an example of how much of the way that our culture has reacted to disability in the past has been to move people out of the center of our communities and onto the edges. And if you don't have people with disabilities in your church, one, it may be because they're on the edges of your community and you haven't looked for them. And two, because your church hasn't made church available to them. And I think there's all sorts of ways to think about that. But I don't think you need a, like, quote, special needs ministry to invite people with disability into your community. I think you need to know them and love them, and then make sure that your church is a place where they can be themselves. And that is also dangerous to both the toxic positivity of American Christian churches, and also the ways that we like to make church a performance. Because when you invite people who don't live in the world in the same way that most people live in the world, you're going to have noises that are different. You're going to have needs that are different. You know, if you are inviting someone who is blind into your community, you're going to need to find ways for them to know the words of the song and to be able to read the words of the song. And you're going to have to think creatively about that. If you have steps leading up to your sanctuary and you are inviting someone with a wheelchair, it all needs to be thought about. And so, you know, I think about the ways that our family has been welcomed into the two different churches we've been part of during Ace's life. And in our first church, when Ace was little, he could not keep himself away from the stage during music. And so it was part of, like, the delight of the community that as worship started, Ace went down the aisle, and he just stood at the bottom of the stage staring at the guitarist. And it was beautiful. And it's also, like, requires flexibility.
Yep.
Yeah, to be an inclusive space is to say, we want you and need you exactly as you are.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really beautiful. You were saying something, and just thinking about the center and the margins, and so how easy it is to just push people to the margins, and oftentimes when I think we're at some of our most harmful is when we have centered ourselves, right? And what's so beautiful is when you can actually have a congregation or a community or a family or a neighborhood or a school or a classroom that really has that mentality. It's like it's not them just kind of like centered to themselves, but it's really like expanding the center. And they have that almost agility and flexibility to see it, and yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like it, and not like that's how they worship. And what do I have to learn from that? You know, and we have a number of years ago went through a tricky season in life, and I was at a church, and at the church we had like a special needs ministry, and about a bunch of like hundreds of students there. And so, you know, I'd get connected to some of them, but a couple of them, like, I got really connected with. And one of them got my phone number. And so when I moved away, every single day, he would text me and call me and Facebook message me. And at first I was like, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was as if it was like the steadfast love of the Lord that never ceases, that never comes to an end. And his name is Asa. And Asa is every single day. I mean, I could show like 5 straight years. And I just, it's like, he didn't ask for this, and he's in a wheelchair, like, but all he wanted was a wheelchair that would rise so he could stand. And so, and he's like part of our worship team. Like, he's just like, cause he loves to sing, and he just, there's something about this, but it was wild. In my pain, so many people pulled away from me, but he saw my humanity.
Yeah.
He saw that he understood, I know what it's like. And he taught me. And it was like, and so, I think what you are getting at and talking about is it shapes us and helps us see wildly different.
Yeah.
I want to double down on a couple of your chapters in the book, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of talking about it. And again, I just think the way that you title is amazing to me. I mean, I think just The Blessed Are the Rest of Us is an amazing book title. How limits and longing make us whole. And I just think that there's just so much that, as I flipped through the book, blessed are the weak ones. But then you said, for the ones who grieve. And I just, for the weak ones, the way that you just looked you were flipping it. Again, just from the semantics, the way it was so intentional. But I'd love for us just to talk maybe for the ones who grieve. Because I started to flip through that chapter, and a couple times I just had to put it down. And similar to you, I was like, I just got to sit with that for a second. Man, where was this 5 years ago? But because it was just so weighty. Talk a little bit about what you learned about grief. Yeah, just a little bit on the behind the scenes in the chapter.
Yeah. Well, in the chapter, I talk about the grief that I experienced when I got the prenatal diagnosis. But I also talk about the grief that I saw in my oldest son, who was 7 when Ace was born. He's now almost 16. And there's a scene in that chapter that is of the first time Ace ever stood, and all of us cheering for him as he's in the bedroom, squatting over and over, finally getting to the point where he balanced. And how my oldest son, who's just a very sensitive soul, just started crying and was like, why am I crying? And how much I think we tend to separate grief from the rest of life. There's most of the time we're happy, and then, we hit these pockets of grief, and they're real, and it happens to everybody. And I do think that when we start to live with the reality of vulnerability, and you start to follow Jesus's example of being fully human, that you start to hold that grief at the same time as you hold your joy. Yeah. And I think that's something that in that moment when my son is laughing and crying and being like, why is this happening to me? I saw him as this, this is his first example in his life of someone he loves who's worked harder than anybody else to get to this point. His brother was almost 2, trying to stand on his feet for the first time, and everybody else gets to just pop up one day and doesn't do 2 years of therapy to get the strength to do it. And it's such a mystery what human emotions can do. But yeah, to hold that at the same time, to hold all your love and all your fear and all your sorrow in the same hand, I think that is like the gift of growing older too, of like the more we age, the more we suffer, the more we grieve, and the more we understand joy.
Yeah.
And yeah, even as I wrote, as I was researching this book right before I started to write it, my dad passed away, and it was he got brain cancer. It was like 11 months and fast and painful, and also like some of the like one of the sweetest seasons of my life, to spend that time with him, to walk with him through it, to be with my family in it, to like acknowledge what I really believe is true. And in that sense, like, this idea that Jesus is saying we're whole when we grieve, we're moving towards wholeness as we grieve. Like, I feel that so deeply, that it is that the grief is there with the joy, and learning how to hold those things and not squash either of them, it's such a process of gaining wisdom.
Yeah. Well, that story I was hoping you were going to talk about is page 52. I like double clicked on it. Your oldest son's name is August.
Yeah.
And just when you described that moment in the book, I was like, wow, like this is again one of those things that he understood, but somehow as we get older, we don't know how to do it. It's like we bifurcate, it's like, okay, I can be joyful or I can be grieving. Like, but to hold both of those together in the same moment. And it's like, it's so beautiful. And you look at that and go, that's the mark of we're moving towards wholeness, as you kept saying, it's like this peace. And I don't know if you have this happen, Micha, like a lot, but I feel like, I feel just super, super tender. Like just when I was reading, like I feel like just even listening to you, I'm like, even as you were like retelling the story of August, like I feel like, oh my goodness, like I'm on like the verge of like, but I feel like the way that you write, again, there's that slowness, there's that intentionality, but it feels like it's just that invitation to embrace all the joy and hold all the weight together. And somehow there's room to hold space for it all. And again, as I just started like moving through some of these chapters, the last one I got to was for the ones who long for justice. And it just like, again, it was like, okay, for the weak ones, okay. Later on, it's like for the true ones, like for the ones who grieve, like for the ones who long for, like, again, it was like this, as I just kept reading it just felt like the more that we were moving towards wholeness in Jesus, the more expansive and the more you're like, oh, that's where the center is. That's where the center is. That's where it's all, that's like, it's so much more wider and expansive than I could have ever dared to imagine or dream. Talk about the justice chapter and where and what was kind of behind that you were writing.
I think as I started to give myself allow myself to have like a bigger vision of what's going on in the Beatitudes, it started to feel like there's the first half is about our limits and the second half is about our longings. And that when Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, like the idea of that hunger and thirst for what is right and good and just in the world is, again, taking us back to this place of vulnerability. Because when we, I know that all around us right now, everyone is wanting to stick their heads in the sand about the election because we just all feel, we just don't want to relive it, right? It just feels like this never-ending story that we keep living out, this Groundhog Day of America. And it's so painful to pay attention to the world. It's so painful to pay attention to war. It's so painful to know that children in Palestine are starving and that they're facing famine. It's so painful to feel like we can know what's going on and we can't do anything to stop it. And I feel like in that, this is that invitation to humanity and vulnerability, to long, to just keep longing, and to find in that desire for, whether it's me loving my son and recognizing how much the world has, all the systems around him have been built to exclude him, and or the longings that I have for him to be able to have a friend when he really struggles to speak and connect in ways that other 9-year-olds connect with each other. That's a longing for justice. The longing for those of us who are white and have, really in the last 5 or 10 years become aware of the intrinsic racism inside of us and also in the systems around us. And for those moments when we feel like, what do we even do right now to move away from these systems that oppress people in our society and in our culture? And I find so much hope in Jesus inviting us to first long for something better,
Yeah.
to hold the weight of it. Because I really do believe that as we hold the weight of the injustice we see around us, the more we watch it and receive it, the more we begin to move towards rightness and goodness in the world. And we start to find what our calling is, to move everybody along with us towards that justice. So Gregory Boyle, I quote him in the book, and he says, the Beatitudes aren't as much a spirituality as a geography. They tell us where to stand.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. Will you say that one more time? That's remarkable.
Yeah. He says the Beatitudes are not so much a spirituality as a geography. They tell us where to stand.
You tie that into the longing of justice. And it's like, it makes me think like, where am I willing to stand? Where am I willing to hold? And even just the examples that you were willing just to share just a moment ago of all that is happening in the world. And it reminds me of Thomas Merton often would talk about being a contemplative activist, that in your activism, where you're out and you are, to use Boyle's language and your language, longing for justice and standing, you're going to feel the weight of it, which will bring you right back to the contemplative, because you're like, God, please fix this. How long, oh Lord, please help. Which, as you spend time in the presence, it's like going to always send you right back to just continue to feed you to stand. And it's like in that kind of movement, it's as if like, oh man, again, that movement towards wholeness, that you're not just staying in the presence, or I'm just out doing, like it's, you're bringing and feeling the full weight, but also not trying to carry it all on your own.
Yeah.
You in the for the ones who long for justice chapter, I again, this is another moment I just I just stopped and I was like, did somebody ask you this? Why did you keep the baby?
Yeah.
Was that a common question you got? Was it like just when I just read that, like, on the school blacktop, my newborn wrapped against my body, my answer was weaker than I wanted it to be. And then we wanted him. Sorry, I'm like reading your own work.
Yeah.
But I just again, just the way that you write at which setting a scene. And I'm like, it's like hard enough to be human. And then how do you make sense of all that and answer so beautifully and respond so well?
I don't know if I answered beautifully then, but yeah, that was the one time the question was outright asked. And I felt that question all the time. And I do think it depends on where you live. I was in San Francisco in the city. And one of the first things I realized before I even gave birth to Ace was that I tried to find a support group for families of kids with Down syndrome. And there wasn't one that was English speaking in San Francisco, in this giant city. And one of the things I realized after he was born was just how few babies were being born in San Francisco with Down syndrome. And, this is a long conversation we could have about prenatal testing, about like how there are how often it's assumed that if you have this diagnosis, you would want to terminate. And so much of that is built on a culture of ableism. The same thing we've been talking about. The closer we can get to being machines, the better. And anyone who's vulnerable, if we can prevent that, then we should prevent it. And so I just kind of found myself flabbergasted by that at the beginning. And that question came to me as I wrote on the blacktop when he was just a couple of weeks old. And it was by actually a person who was not trying to be mean. They were really just curious. And it was considered obviously I have an answer to that, because who would do that? Who would choose to just continue this pregnancy after finding this out? But as I went on, I wasn't asked that again straight out, but I felt it from people often. Yeah. And it really is a view, it's a view of the world. And it is a view that as I began to reckon with my own hustle mentality, and how the way that I wanted God to love me was by what I could do, and for how good I could be, the more that I realized, oh, this is ableism in me. This is I have had to wrestle it out, and it's still in there. And that is something that we're all susceptible to.
Yeah. Well, it's just so wild is we think in our ableism, us going and working and striving and hustling, that's what's going to make us more whole. Mm-hmm. And so we give ourselves great permission why to not take that stand, why to not feel that feeling, because it slows us down.
Yeah.
And just in what I was reading of you, it was just this, it's okay. It's okay to go slow. It's okay, because you will experience a depth and a wholeness with Jesus that our ableism could never provide or satisfy. Yeah. And again, just beautifully written. And I'm so excited for this just to be in the world, and I can't wait just to share it. And I do have to say, just this was my favorite, is because I told this to Micah before. I came home and Micah had sent this to my house, but it wasn't for me. It was for my wife. And so it was just such this beautiful moment. I was like, Sarah, you know Micah too? I'm interviewing her on the podcast. And so we got a chuckle out of that. But Micah, where can people find you online? Is there a place that we should direct them to learn more about your work?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Micha Boyett. And I also have an Instagram that is just a Down syndrome advocacy Instagram called Ace Face is My Friend, that just follows Ace's life. I have a Substack that is called The Slow Way, and a contemplative prayer podcast called The Slow Way as well. It's a weekly guided prayer.
I did not know that, but of course you have a Substack called The Slow Way and a contemplative podcast called Of course you do. geez, this is like it's just so true of like what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
sorry. I just had to like chuckle because I was like done all this research on you. I missed that part. So go
That's
ahead.
awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, then the Lucky Few podcast, I host with two other women who are moms of kids with Down syndrome, and we've been going for 6 years. We have 250 episodes that are, Down syndrome advocacy, shouting the worth of people with Down syndrome, really providing for caregivers just all the information that they might ever wonder. And we have a lot of fun doing it. So
Who are the other two co-hosts?
it's Heather Avis and Mercedes Lara.
Awesome. I have one embarrassing story with Heather Avis. I saw her backstage one time, and I think she was standing next to Ann Voskamp, and I saw the two of them, and I was like, "You're from the Lucky Few podcast," and I spilled my coffee, I think, on her, and I just like, "I'm so sorry," and I think I just walked away. I got so nervous, and so I'm just, it was really a moment. So,
that's wonderful.
Blessed are the rest of us. So, but please listen to the Lucky Few podcast. It is, I mean, I'm telling you, just the conversations that they have, 250 plus episodes. It is, it is just well worth the listen and the learning. And it's been really helpful for me in helping reframe and reshape some of my own thinking, because I think I was really more drawn too early on to kind of the special needs or my own having to wrestle through my own ableism. And I think just some of the stuff that you all have talked about has been really, really shaping and forming for me personally. So Micha, thank you so much for joining us on the Craft and Character podcast. Friends, go grab Blessed Are the Rest of Us, How Limits and Longing Make Us Whole. And if I just told you all the names that has just shouted out this book, you would just be like, all right, I'm going to get it right now. So please do yourself a favor. It is real. It is honest. It is human. It is just an important read. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Craft and Character podcast. If there's ever any way I can serve you, never hesitate to reach out, Steve@steveryancarter.com. And until then, grace and peace.